Cheers to you. So we're going to be doing another episode of Kamilla Singh show. And like we all say that we are on unceded, stolen land of Kwantlen, Musqueam, and Silvertip people. So we want to pay our respect for the people of this land. And we are here. We're going to have another episode to talk about what's happening around us. And Happy New Year to all of you from our team on Fiji in Focus and Kamilla Singh Show and all the 3 or 4 shows that we do here. We want to remember you, and I hope this new year or 2023 will be a good year for all of you. 2022, we had lots of ups and downs, so many people we have lost, so many people are still being sick and all that. So I hope there is a little ray of sunshine at the end of that, and we're going to have a good 2023 for all of us. And with me today, we have one person, and it doesn't matter because she can speak for everybody. So her name is Annie Ohana, and she is an activist, she is an organizer, she is a school teacher at LA Madison, and she has been with us from day one. So Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, yeah, one day at a time. I think that's the...
So what is your resolution for this year? Because this is the first show of 2023.
Yes.
And as the year comes in, we always make resolution. Yeah. And the first thing is I hear going to the gym, eating healthy, and all that. And I wonder how long that lasts.
I know, exactly. Yeah, health is definitely important, I'll say that. But actually for me, it's kind of continuing to do the work where we don't let ourselves just do what other people want us to do and just kind of be told like, oh, don't push too far, don't do too much, right? But rather to really help people, like empower them, amplify their voices. I want to keep doing that work. And as a teacher, as an actor, like all the different things, I think it's a great resolution to have because there's so many things going on in our world and we have to remain active. So I hope I can continue doing that work this year.
So we're gonna today we're gonna talk about federal politics. We always have been talking about provincial and municipal, and this is not going away and hasn't gone away. So let's talk a little bit, switch the gears and go to the federal politics. And I don't know whether you'll agree with me or not, but most of the media that I have been watching, they say the newsmaker of 2022 was the Convoy protest at the parliaments. Do you agree with that?
Unfortunately, yes. Like I think it shouldn't have been. I think the mandates are gone, and yet here we are. COVID, RSV, there's certainly I think the convoy did more harm than good. I wish I could say that. I always believe in people's voice, and that we should protest and we should stand up for our rights. But I feel like the convoy did more harm than good. So I think they were the newsmaker because they really did cause quite a bit of chaos and conflict in Canada that I think hurt a lot of us in ways that didn't really advance our democracy with any great strides at all.
We live in a very democratic country. We can protest, we can rally, we can do all that. But there has to be a limit to that. As long as you are getting the message out and not hurting, because when these people were out in the Ottawa, there were people that lived there. There is a population beside being the Parliament Hill there that I think their life came to an halt. And so that's why when it becomes a little bit violent, then the attention is not paid to your cause. It's always talk about whatever bad has happened there. So,
and I think the violence here was that we saw them go against authority. They didn't really take, they're talking about public health, but it's the safety of all the citizens. And lastly, I can't forget this, the amount of BIPOC protesters who have faced much harsher consequences in trying to go to Parliament Hill or anywhere else for that matter, and being treated like criminals. And yet this convoy got away with quite a bit. And I think that's really important to recognize, right? Before the Emergencies Act, before all that went down, a lot of people commented on that. That, when we go to the streets to march for something, it's not always seen as a good thing. There's over police presence, all of that. And Indigenous communities will tell you, all about that. And so I think that's part of the story as well, that they definitely had privilege and advantage that other people fighting for the same human rights are just as important.
And resources as well.
Yeah.
because
Absolutely.
remember how much money was been pouring into their tank to go ahead and can take time off and stay away from work and all that. So what I was going to say that I don't want to say we have a government in place. It's a minority government.
Yeah.
It's I wouldn't want to say that they are on life support. If they if NDP pulls the plug, they will be on life support. And then next month is February. That's when the budget comes out.
Yeah.
Do you feel that so far there's a lot of calmness, government is working okay, everything seems to be okay. After the budget comes out, do you think that this government will survive, or do you think Jagmeet will say enough is enough? And the reason I'm saying that, he's also pushing this Liberal government about putting more money to the healthcare, which Trudeau is holding on, and he needs accountability. How the money is going to be used. It should be on the provinces how we use the money. Every province is different. Our province is an aging province. We need more money to take care of elderly and seniors, right?
Yeah, I think they will survive, because I think the NDP calculation, at least how I see it, would be that the alternative is much worse. If you have to deal with a conservative government that might not even agree with some of those things, and even if they, they're not really for funding healthcare. They want to privatize a lot of healthcare, which would be such a horrific slippery slope. I
It's going to be double.
Yeah,
double staggered
like I think the idea of like getting to a hospital quicker or seeing a doctor quicker, there's a lot of nuance to that conversation and how much that might cost, right? So I would say I think they will survive. I think it's okay for a government. I don't really care what stripe it is. I think it's okay to suggest that we need to transform our systems a little bit. I don't think just pouring money into the healthcare system is really going to solve all the problems we have. I think there needs to be a sense of, what are our population numbers like? Do we need more smaller urgent care centers? Like, there's a lot of, how about nurses and doctors and their treatment? So there's so much to this. But I do think if it's done with nuance, I think you'll see that the Liberal government could survive. Are they going to be as strong? No, maybe not. But I don't see us going into a snap election. I don't think Canadians are ready for one. For what? Last time it was the exact same result.
Yes.
So we're going to do this again and spend millions of dollars.
Yeah.
That to me is a big one, right? I would say work on the issues, find solutions. Don't just put us to an election where all the promises rarely get done anyways, right?
And also with the NDP, even they do decide not going to be supporting the Liberals, I don't think they are in position to call an election because they are not financially. Liberals and Conservatives, they have money in their pocket, but not NDP. And I think the best thing for him to see how it goes. And next year, in 2024, the election is coming anyways. So if they want majority government, they can go ahead and do that.
We need dialogue and hard work right now. We don't need to go knocking on doors, and like that's just such a waste of time when you realize that healthcare is provincial as well as federal. So there's a lot of conversations and a lot of time and effort needed to solve this issue. I don't think an election will take away from those really important plans that need to be developed.
And I think housing is another thing. Housing is a big one, and we have a new premier here, and so much money that provincial government can put into housing, but it's also the responsibility of federal government to house the population, which they are backing off, and there's not very much money coming from the federals as well.
And the recent announcement, or I guess the implementation of the 2-year ban, the numbers don't pan out in terms of like, oh my God, we're being overwhelmed by foreign buyers, right? But even if you wanted to do that, so, in some element, perhaps if there is some speculation, I don't know if that's going to rectify the entire market. I don't know if that's going to make housing affordable for everybody all of a sudden after 2 years. So I think you're right. I think the federal government's not doing enough to really provide those long-term solutions, which in part of that is more supply. I do think the provincial government does have a larger role to play. I can understand it doesn't have all the answers. It doesn't have all the equipment per se to do that. We know who builds the houses. But at the same time, when you have this like laissez-faire, like hands off, that's really kind of dangerous to me. And we're seeing that because the market just doesn't really think about people. It commodifies housing. It wants to sell it. It wants to make money, not to actually house people that need to survive. And you want to talk about the reality of Canadians' economic survival, the fact that so much money has to go to housing just makes everything worse in terms of, healthcare, everything else that you have to worry about, because so much of your money is locked into just having a roof over your head.
Another thing that was, when I was talking about it, I think Queen Elizabeth, she was queen, and lot of Canadians respected Queen Elizabeth being a woman, and when I was born, that's the only queen I know. And her passing away, and we have a king, King Charles now. They did a survey, and only 17 or 18% of Canadians want any kind of a crown or a queen or somebody like that. And
Monarchy.
we spend, and whenever they come in here, we spend so much money on them anyways. So do you think Canada might come at some point in time that we do not want that kind of a monarchy? Or should we stay away, just like USA or other countries? What are you benefiting? Are we benefiting from the royalties?
And I think we have to realize there's a disconnect there. You say you want to decolonize, but then you literally decide overnight to have a day of mourning, right? Like September 19th, I believe it was. I know it's not going to be every year, but that really rubbed people the wrong way. So I think the monarchy, unfortunately, represents a lot of that imperialism, colonialism that we are now suggesting, is problematic, right? We make these claims. So I do think there is, for those who have that respect or their lineage comes from there, that's one thing. You have your right to believe in that and to respect that. That's not a problem. But I don't think it's disrespectful to suggest that Canada needs to cut ties to actually do justice to these like stolen lands. When we give these land acknowledgements, a lot of people say, if you're going to say it, what are you going to do about it? Right? What we can do about it is to actually de-link from these empirical powers that have caused such harm right here on these lands. So I do think it is necessary to do it, and I feel that we need to do it in a way that people don't just kind of jump at each other's throats about, you hate this, you hate that. It's not about hate. It's that there has been violence perpetrated over centuries
and
by these powers and stolen land, and it continues. So, again, if that's your heritage and that's one thing, there's a way to have that in its place, but then to also bring justice forward through, I do think, some sort of delinking so that we just, take away that monarchy part. The finances are an issue. I know it's not an overwhelming amount of money. I think that is a reality when you do the calculations, but every penny counts. And I don't think it's fair to give that money to a monarchy that we can use so much better here at home. For example, to actually bring about Indigenous sovereignty, to actually bring about reconciliation. Let's put the money there. That to me makes much more sense than just following a history that for many people is not a positive history at all.
And when we are still talking about monarchy, when she passed away, Trudeau went with his family, and so is the Governor General. And I was listening to the radio one day, and they said Trudeau spent $8,000 a night to stay there, and I don't know how many nights he was there. And so is the Governor General. Governor General is a representation of the Queen in this country. If she spends the money and if she's there, I can justify. As an ordinary taxpayer, I can say, but what was Trudeau doing with that kind of money and spending that kind? Was it worth it? What did he do? Like I say, when we talk about money, when we talk about old age, when we're talking about single parents, when we talk about healthcare, when we talk about housing, there is no money. But for somebody like that, blindfoldly spending that kind of money is not justified.
And I can see that our Governor General is an Indigenous woman, and I do think there's some power to, because she decided to go, right? I was interested to see what would happen there. But I agree with you. I think there could have been different ways because yes, again, we are constitutional monarchy, so the idea of having to show your respect, I think that could have been done from home,
Yeah.
right? Especially we're still under COVID.
Yeah.
So I think if anything, there's even a greater reason to go, not right now, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's kind of expenditure, it doesn't sit right with
Yeah.
a lot of Canadians. Again, I don't think it means that for those who are monarchists, that somehow not going means you don't show your regards. Yeah.
And $8,000 a night is just a hotel, not including the food, the drinks, and the plane tickets or nothing else.
Yeah.
So a lot of people were upset about that, but I think it came that time and is gone. So next thing what we can talk about is Bill C-15, United Nations of Indigenous People. And I know that when something comes up, and Pope was here too, I think we say the right things, but do we do as Canadians, do we do or honor or do whatever the wrongs that us or whoever has done to the Indigenous people? Have we done that? Has there anything came out of it?
I see it this way. Truth and Reconciliation, one of the calls to action was to get an apology from the Pope.
Yeah.
And a lot of Indigenous people worked very hard on that. And yet, the opinion is still split in some ways, right? Some people felt it was not enough. And I also think so. I think the language wasn't quite there, legally speaking. And others that outright rejected it. But really making a point as to the folks that did go to the Vatican, the people that worked on this for years, that there was a lot of power to that. And that is much appreciated, right? No matter what the Pope ended up saying and doing. I think it's going to take a lot more than one bill. I think what is being requested is so much more. And as someone that, when I did my criminology degree, I saw cases of priests accused of the horrific crimes that took place. Residential school itself was a crime, but even within that, and to know that so few people ever faced any repercussions for that, that's just a very simple one, right? Let alone the larger issues. Bottom line is, it's called land back. It's called Indigenous sovereignty. This is a much bigger conversation. And these little piecemeal practices really don't suggest that we're doing much at all. That's the bottom line. So, should they be putting together bills and moving forward action? Absolutely. But you notice how many times you have to go to the Supreme Court for everything? Now $40 billion this and that. And it's like, that shows you that these efforts really aren't taking us much of anywhere. And I still think the settler voice, I'm a settler, the settler voice is lacking. I don't think we understand truly what reconciliation is. So out of the efforts of what happened with the Pope, things are coming, which is good. But I think many people would suggest that this is far below, even the bare minimum of what is needed to actually get to what we would call like Indigenous justice, right? It's more painful than people think because it might need to be, right? So that includes our resource extraction policies, right? Our reliance on oil and gas, what we do with our environment, missing and murdered Indigenous women, education, right? Like really thinking about equity with Indigenous peoples. And again, that nation-to-nation relationship. I don't see evidence that we actually believe in a true nation-to-nation relationship, which is what we used to have, or what should have been, what should have been before Canada was ever established.
Another thing that was made the headline in 2022 is the war between Russia and Ukraine. I know our government has been very generous, giving money to Ukrainians to fight the war, and should be, because all the other G5 countries and should be helping them. And then giving the money out to the third world countries, all this is needed. I am not saying stop it, don't do that. At the same time, I like to see that the money, the taxpayer money, go to the First Nations people where they don't have a clean drinking water. Why are we not looking at our backyard first, whether our children are fed or we are housed or our people are taken care of, then to flood out or push out these bucks and millions of dollars and billions to the other countries? They need it, I know, but we need it too. So what comes first?
I so hear you. I don't really know if what comes first. I think these are all human rights because Ukrainians need water.
Yes.
Indigenous peoples need water. Like we all need water, and many more. I don't mean to make fun of it. I think at the end of the day, long term, we need to do this. And I think we need to stop putting a money figure on it, if that makes sense. Because the health and prosperity and strength of Indigenous nations must always be the number one priority.
Forefront, yeah.
Even if that means that, okay, we have to tighten our belt in different ways, right?
Yeah.
I think Russia does, unfortunately, represent a rather large threat. I think Ukraine was just one piece.
Yeah.
And somehow they haven't moved on yet, which is a good thing. But also there's the reality that, we're spending all this money on military equipment and weaponry and if we want a peaceful world, that's not the way to go either, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people feel there are different ways we can achieve a lasting peace in that area rather than just continuously arming different countries. Wait another 10 years, there'll be something else that happens.
Yeah.
So I think priorities, again, these are human rights. And I would love to see something that says, okay, well, this Ukraine situation is happening and we have to support however we can. And that can be debated, how that looks like. But why not just say at the same time, this is the guarantee, and I mean a real guarantee, within a year, we're going to go into every single nation. Because that clean water, that housing, whatever it looks like, that return of sovereignty over education, healthcare, whatever that looks like, you're going to see a long-term benefit that will give back the money, that will bring about stability and calm and lower levels of violence, all kinds of things. You're not going to see that overnight. I think we always assume everything needs to happen in 24 hours.
Yeah.
When you spend those millions of dollars building a water treatment plant, you got to give it time so that a generation of kids and families can grow up with better resources, with better supplies. You're going to see what those 20, 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds, how much better it's going to be, right? So long-term thinking, that's what I want to see. That's the priority. Long-term thinking instead of one or the other. Because some of these situations will need to be dealt with no matter what. But it is interesting to note, I think you're right, that Indigenous tends to always fall down. Well, now there's this. So Indigenous falls down, right? Now there's this, and then again, right? And that is absolutely the pattern. We need to stop, that's what I think.
The
we need to stop
priority
doing
needs
that.
to be in place.
The priority needs to be in place and should always be followed.
Yes.
Even if that means...
Some crisis, other crisis come that can hold or whatever we have. Then
even
we
if that means in
it.
a budget, you're going to say, well, this year we're going to be a little tighter.
Yeah.
We're not going to have as much profit, right? I might be naive on this, but I do believe that. It's like a family. You have to feed your kids. Right? You have to take care of your family.
Before
Somebody
you
gets sick.
give donation for Cancer Society or something.
And sometimes that means a smaller budget a month. You don't go see that movie. You don't go do this. You don't travel. As regular working class people, we do this every day, knowing what the priorities are. I think our government loses sight of priorities. And so that means this is not a Ukraine or Indigenous, because even Ukrainians, my history is not great. But at the end of the day, the Ukrainian history and legacy is separate from the Russian one.
Yeah.
So that idea of a longer term culture and nation and civilization is a similar idea, that idea of Indigenous sovereignty and the idea of having autonomy over your own culture and your own people. So this is the same thing. It's just a different part of the world. So just as Ukrainians want to see themselves be free, be independent, to celebrate themselves as Ukrainians, and they need food and water and heating and housing and all the things they need, it's the same holds true for any other human anywhere else in the world, right? So I do want to see the government, God forbid, politicians who are willing to kind of stake their careers on a better future for Indigenous peoples. And the willingness to go into an election saying, here's what my priorities were. It cost money. It took time. But I promise you it's going to lead to incredible results for the people, on these lands. That's what I want to see. I want to see politicians willing to do that rather than taking shortcuts and saying, oh, I made this money and here's the budget and here's the surplus and here's that, when actually there's not much of anything. BC's in a surplus. But when you go to the hospital, you're left there for hours on end. I don't think anybody's thinking about the surplus at that moment in time when they need to see a doctor and they can't see one.
Because it's the hospitals are so shortage of professionals, doctors, nurses, and we should have done this long time ago. We cannot produce a doctor overnight. It takes 7 to 8 years, and the nurses, and because they are so stressed out, the nurses are leaving to go to another jobs because they can't handle the stress, right? So can you blame them? No, you can't.
Yeah, and that's exactly why long-term solutions. Don't tell me you have all the money in the world, but you're not willing to invest in what needs to be done. So we're always going to have these issues around Indigenous issues if we don't actually invest properly. And so a long answer here, but is the government doing enough? No. On so many different levels, right? And the government is us.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, are we prioritizing the right things, right? And I have to say,
are we we are the only taxpayer, whether it's federal or provincial.
Yes.
Are we, if we are the government, if you and me have to do this or use this $5 or $10, where would your dollar gonna? We have priority.
Absolutely.
We know where the dollar we're gonna put.
Yeah.
But that power has been taken away from us, it seems.
And to be fair, you're right, it's a political game.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's one Ukrainian, excuse me, I need to sneeze. There's not one Ukrainian refugee that would suggest that, oh no, don't help the Indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
We know that's not true. Issues that are being controlled by political narratives
Yeah.
that have nothing to do with real life.
Yeah.
Right? They're looking at the election.
Yeah.
Stop looking at the election. Look at us.
Yeah.
Look at what is needed to be done, right?
That's right.
We're not pawns for you
Yeah.
because our lives do matter, right? Indigenous sovereignty, Indigenous, reconciliation, that's what's going to move this country forward or whatever, countries forward. I do get angry about it because it feels like some of these conversations are important.
Yep.
These questions are great,
Yeah.
but what are we talking about? We're talking about a political strategy rather than actual, dollars and cents that affect people's lives.
And on the same note, when I'm looking at the clock, we are almost out of the time, but I also want to say that when we talk about Indigenous people, and most of us, maybe we don't hear that. I know when you think about suicide, right, Indigenous children or the youth or the teenagers are the highest rate of suicide in this country. Something to look at it, then why is happening. And just because they are just pushed in the corner and nothing is being given to them. They are yours, my kids. If my kids and your kids, if you're living here, would get treatment right away. But just because they are pushed, they are not being heard. So I think we all can become advocates for the Indigenous people of this country that allow us to share the land with you, me, and everyone else. With that, have a wonderful New Year's, and we shall meet you again in next couple of weeks. Thank you for watching Kamilla Singh Show.